Where do the numbers come from? It would be somewhat difficult and confusing to try to understand the concept of number without understanding in a certain way what an abstraction is. As an example, here we will use a rock band. If, for example, we isolate the vocalist and have him sing alone or with other musicians, the majority of followers upon hearing it, I would think it was the full band playing. Even if the others are not found, since they would automatically relate their voice to the entire ensemble. When you represent something through images, colors, flavors, sounds, symbols, words, smells, etc., you are making a mental abstraction of that something.
As an example, define what the following sound is. Almost everyone would immediately say it's a dog, but a dog is something much more complicated than a bark. However, we can represent it by that sound. As an example, now define it as the following image. It is a very, very beautiful image. Almost everyone would immediately say it's a woman, but a woman is infinitely more complicated than an image. The image in this case is not a woman, but it visually represents what a woman is. As an example, pay attention to what's going on in your mind while you read. The aroma of a cup of hot coffee. The sound of an ambulance. The taste of chocolate cake. The face of the person I like.
So a mental abstraction is in a certain way, using a small piece of information about something to represent everything. Now look at the following sets and say what they have in common. Some people would use their abstract thinking and say some of these things. All groups are enclosed in a wooden frame. They all have a light blue background. All elements are fruits. All elements are green. But if you said, each of the sets has the same number of elements, you had an abstract numerical thought. And that's where the idea of the number comes from.
It is not known exactly when the notion of number arose, but it can be assumed that at first each of the elements of a set was represented by drawing a line. Observe. This system is used to this day, and if you wonder why the sets always have 5 lines, it is because these 5 lines symbolize the fingers of a hand. Since just like a small child does, the first tool we had to count were our fingers. Later, the shepherds represented the number of sheep they cared for with pebbles that they kept in a leather bag tied around their waist. There was a direct relationship. Each stone represented a sheep. Thus, if at the end of the day there were 1 or more pebbles left over, that meant that there were 1 or more sheep lost.
Thus, throughout history and through different cultures, different symbols were created to represent the elements of a set. Here are some examples. There is the Sumerian culture, the Egyptians, the Mayans, the Greeks, the Romans, and the Incas. But there were more cultures. Of course, by repeating the symbol that represented an element many times, it ended up being confusing. So they created symbols that represented sets with a certain number of elements, giving a lot of importance to 5 and 10. In this example, all the symbology represents the number 5. In this other example, all the symbols represent the number 10. Thus, with the evolution of mathematics, a name and a symbol were assigned to each set depending on the quantity of its elements. No matter the shape or characteristics of the elements, or whether they are similar or different. At this point, I must emphasize that it is very good that we have a numerical system, with symbols accepted and officially used in almost the entire world. Since the name given to the number can change depending on the language, but the symbol that represents it does not. Just as an example, the number 7. That name is given in English, but in different languages it will be called differently. So the essence of a number is not in the language or the symbols we use to represent it. Just as in the case of 17, it will be called different ways, depending on the language. And it will have different symbols that represent it depending on the time and culture. So the essence of a number is in what it is, that is, in the number of elements in the set, and not in the way in which we represent that information. So, anyone with some imagination and basic knowledge can create a symbology for a number system. Here we are going to create an example with it. The pencil has a value of 1, draft 10, the pencil sharpener 100, the 1000 rule, and the desk is worth 10,000. Here we have 3 problems and we can solve them using the value of each symbol. The pencil sharpener has a value equal to 100, 2 erasers equal 20, and 3 pencils equal 3, meaning the answer in this case is 123. In the second, the answer is 1241. And in the third, the answer is 21,403. Finally, observe the symbology in the examples and the total value of each one. Look at each of these examples. Now try to find each of the answers to the following problems. Look at the examples on the left side to find the answers on the right side, and remember that the solution to each problem is found within the problem itself. Answers: 2, 8th, 73, 635, 201, and the minus 36.
I hope this information has clarified something in your mind and can be useful to you. Remember, if you find math difficult or if you just want to learn more in a different way, you can follow this channel and watch all the videos. Thank you.